do you want to contact any of his employers, or are you just going to kind of let?
Look, Jesse, I work all around the world, but this guy doesn't know about me because clearly he didn't do his background check. I work all around the world for the last 20 years defending human rights for all. I've written children's books to teach children how to value the freedom of others, the dignity of others. So for him to come and attack me and to push his left propaganda is just a perfect example of how the lefts are more willing to push their ideology than to actually protect children. I mean, for him to sit on the hotline for an hour tweeting about it the whole time, his rant about yet they're not there yet. Over 300,000 followers this guy has. How many? I mean, I want to know who his followers are that are following that kind of a nut. But the fact that he has so many followers and he's holding up a hotline that is supposed to be there to provide real services and immediate help to children in need is abhorrent. He needs to be held accountable for that. You're absolutely right, Jesse. This is appalling.
Well, if you're to kill, call it a fake threat for something on a hotline, you probably have a pretty sad life. All right, thank you for joining us.
Well, this is the kind of thing.
Yeah, go ahead.
Exactly. This is the kind of thing we see in East Germany or in other countries. I work in Iraq. It's the kind of thing we see there and in communist countries. It's not the kind of thing we should be seeing in America. Calling a hotline to take away children from parents because you disagree with celebrating a holiday. I mean, it's insane.
Listen, just don't wish anybody happy Thanksgiving, because that could be a hate crime. Thank you so much for joining us.
That can backfire too.
And I'm glad the kids.
Thank you, Jesse. Right.
Take care.
Thank you.
John Fetterman did his first in-person interview since his stroke, and even MSNBC admits it did not go well.
You hear McConnell, one who's saying that McConnell making it very clear that he's going to stand with Walker. And Walker knows he can survive this. He's not backing down at all. Here it is.
It's sad that people say, I told a surprise, but you're destroying families. And I said that this race is too important for me to give up and for me to stop. So I told a surprise is not going to faze me.
I mean, look, Jonah, they're willing to go ahead with whatever hypocrisy and dishonesty and whatever this whole thing could actually mean. I mean, could this controversy ultimately work to Herschel Walker's advantage?
I think it's possible that it could work to his advantage in terms of this rally around the victim. Herschel Walker's playing a victim here, which I think is ridiculous, but so be it. I think, though, look, if you gave truth serum to virtually all the Republicans that you name checked there, they would all say, gosh, I wish we just had a generic, bland, normal fill-in-the-blank Republican running for this seat, because that's what Mitch McConnell was sort of getting at, is that if you just ran a non-Trump-picked, normal Republican, even one who's a little critical of Trump, like Brian Kemp, the governor, I think Republicans would take the seat in a cakewalk. But this guy is deeply damaged, and they all know it, but they feel like it's too late. They can't back out now, and I think it's just sort of a shameful moment. But it's the political reality.
And the political reality here, to the point about a litmus test that McConnell made to Manu, right? Nobody wants to pick a fight with Trump. Even McConnell on something as deeply personal as the racist epithet that Trump used against his wife, Elaine Chao. What do you take away from McConnell responding to Trump on this, even on that particular issue?
Yeah, so look, I mean, as a husband, I think it's kind of gross, and it's the things people do for politics are things that I would not be willing to do. But on the other hand, I think that what McConnell is showing is that he has something that Donald Trump doesn't, which is actually discipline. And he knows that if he gets into this tit for the tat, you're a poopy head, no, you're a poopy head kind of thing with Donald Trump, it's good for Trump. It's good for people to talk about on cable news, but it's not actually good for Republicans who want to make the entire midterm election a referendum on Joe Biden and the Democrats instead of the just, fecal festival that has become so much of the Republican Party. And so he's keeping his ammo dry.
Fecal festival. I thank you for introducing that term. No, I do it's appropriate. All right, thank you very much, Jonah. I appreciate it. Good to talk to you.
Great to be here.
Okay, and next, the Democratic Senate nominee, John Fetterman, opening up tonight about his stroke and why he needs to rely on closed captioning software on a computer when being interviewed.
As long as I have captioning, I'm able to understand exactly what's being asked.
Plus, we're going to take you inside the Florida courtroom where prosecutors made their final push to persuade jurors to sentence Parkland school shooter Nicholas Cruz to death.
At work is horrifying. I know because it happened to me. And when you're not supported, it's devastating. As Speaker, Tina Kotek blocked an investigation into repeated sexual abuse because she was worried about how it would make her look. She's been called a bully, willing to do anything to protect her power. But covering up sexual abuse because it might make you look bad? I'm a Democrat, but Speaker Kotek, we've all had enough.
Paid for by friends of Christine Trace and PAC ID 19050.
Selecting your window and door store has never been easier. We have stores in Portland, Junction City, and Redmond. And we've been doing it for nearly 20 years. We're open 7 days a week for your convenience. Discount Windows has Milberg windows and doors in stock. Don't wait for your Milberg windows. Go home with them today. Professional installation is available. We're not just any window and door store. Thanks to you, we are Discount Windows.
How do I look?
Good, bro. Let me know if you need anything tonight.
We'll see.
Seriously, man. Like, call me if you need a ride.
Thanks, dude.
Hey, man. You're awake.
So what happened last night?
You texted me and I think about you.
So I didn't hit someone on a bicycle.
No, dude.
Must have been a really bad dream.
Be that friend. Offer a ride.
Text a friend, grab a ride. Just don't drink and drive.
Fox News alert: John Fetterman, the Democrat running for Senate in Pennsylvania, who had a stroke last May, just sat down for his first national TV interview. We're not sure who thought this was a good idea. Remember, this is the guy who literally cannot understand English. Yet the Democrats are determined to prop him up. Watch this.
I'll hear someone speaking, but sometimes the video will be precise on what exactly that they're saying. I use captioning.
His campaign required that he be allowed to use a transcription program on his computer during our interview.
I always thought I was pretty empathetic. Emphatic. I think I was very, empathetic. That's an example of stroke, empathetic. I always thought I was very empathetic.
And now the NBC reporter who conducted that interview said it was clear that during the small talk that occurred before the sit-down, Fetterman didn't understand a word she was saying. Telling you, going to get eaten alive if he runs for Senate and wins. Planned Parenthood is going through a renaissance. Primarily, Planned Parenthood for giving abortions, but now they're trying to find a new market, helping your kids transition.
There are medicines you can take to help your body start the process, like hormone replacement therapy. Some people decide on hormones or surgeries to help their bodies match up to their gender identity. There are medicines you can take to delay puberty for a while. They're called puberty blockers, and they work like a stop sign by halting the hormones testosterone and estrogen that cause puberty changes like facial hair growth and periods. Puberty blockers are safe and can give you more time to figure out what feels right for you.
Planned Parenthood isn't the only group cashing in. Vanderbilt University was recently caught on tape flaunting how much money they make off these gender reassignment surgeries for children.
Some of our UMC financial folks in October of 2016, starting a couple years ago, put down some costs of how much money we think each patient would bring in. And this is only including top surgery, it doesn't include any bottom surgery. And it's a lot of money. These surgeries make a lot of money.
When you factor in the money, it makes sense why the
life has been significantly different following the stroke.
What has that recovery process been like? How has it changed your day-to-day experience?
It's everything. It changes everything.
Yeah.
Everything about it has changed. Basically, having a conversation with your wife, to having a conversation with your children, just things, especially early after the stroke. The ability to really understand exactly what I'm being heard but it gets much, much better where I take in a lot. But to be precise, I use captioning. So that's really the major challenge. And every now and then I'll miss a word every now and then, or sometimes I'll maybe wish two words together. But as long as I have captioning, I'm able to understand exactly what's being asked.
Up front now, senior medical correspondent Elizabeth Cohen. And Elizabeth, Fetterman's health has been a major focus in this crucial race, right? He had been off the trail for a long time. The reporter who conducted that interview, right, obviously spent time with him even before the interview, and she said this tonight.
In some of the small talk prior to the interview, before the closed captioning was up and running, it did seem that he had a hard time understanding our conversation.
So, Elizabeth, when you see in the interview Fetterman reading the transcription off the computer, right, he said he needed the closed captioning. He talked about that. When you look at this interview, when you hear what the reporter said, what stands out to you most?
What stands out to me the most, Aaron, and what stood out to a neurosurgeon we talked to who specializes in stroke, is thinking about auditory processing. He actually, when he had the captions up, he really did seem to understand the reporter quite well. He didn't seem to have trouble understanding what she was asking. So the problem seems to be in auditory processing. And so you can make a lot of progress in that in the next couple of months. That is possible. The neurosurgeon who we spoke with, he said, look, I've had patients who had very, very significant strokes, and they have returned to a very high level of functioning. It seems like he's come a long way in the 5 months or so since he had his stroke. And if he has good physical therapy, good occupational therapy, all the things that we would expect that he has, he really could make good progress. And it's not unusual in many ways that people sometimes need help. They need aids, they need things to help them as they recover. It doesn't mean that they're not going to do well, they just may need help.
Which is interesting because when you talk about it being auditory, you know, she's saying in the small talk before the captioning, it wasn't clear he understood her. So it is, to your point, it seems to be more auditory as he described it. But also Fetterman is still suffering from speech challenges, actually talking, which he talks about in this clip I'm going to play.
I always thought it was pretty empathetic, emphatic. I think I was very, empathetic. That's an example of stroke, empathetic. I always thought I was very empathetic before having a stroke. But now after having that stroke, I really understand, much more kind of the challenges that Americans have day in and day out.
Elizabeth, Fetterman says he will be much better by the time he takes office, but the reality is that his campaign is still refusing to disclose his medical records. So what do you make of that refusal in this context?
So, Aaron, because we don't have his medical records, because his doctors aren't talking, we don't know how far he's come since his stroke in May, and we don't know, therefore, what kind of progress he might be able to make before, if he gets elected, he would take office in a few months. So that's hard to say. I must say that as I heard him and watched him struggle to come up with the word empathetic, I thought, other people sometimes struggle to come up with words. I mean, I think, many times you'll be talking to someone who's trying to think of the word. So that wasn't incredibly shocking to me.
All right. Well, Elizabeth, thank you very much for the perspective there, but obviously significant that he is speaking out just 1 month before Election Day for that first interview. And next, the powerful closing argument from prosecutors as they ask a jury to sentence the Parkland school shooter to death. And a CNN exclusive, communications are down for many in Iran, but tonight you are going to hear from a protester who is there in the country risking their life, who says security forces are shooting and terrorizing residents, even shooting in their homes.
Get MyPillow bed sheets for as low as $29.98. A set of pillowcases for only $9.98. And it didn't include Southern Europeans either, like Italians and Sicilians, who, because their complexions were darker and they tended to live and work with and near African Americans, including working in the fields of Southern sugar plantations, and because they sometimes intermarried with African Americans, they were often demonized as late as the 19th century as uncivilized and racially inferior people, too obviously African to be part of Europe, and as such, racially suspect. They were sometimes shut out of schools, movie houses, and labor unions, or consigned to church pews set aside for Black people, described in the press as swarthy, kinky-haired members of a criminal race, and derided in the streets with epithets like Dago and Guinea, spelled just like the African country.
which was a term of derision applied to enslaved Africans and their descendants. Which all kind of sounds like the themes of a Tommy Tuberville rally, right? Except the targets aren't black. Italians were also, after Black Americans, the second most likely group in America to be lynched. But unlike Black Americans, who fought for more than a century to get an lynching law passed by Congress, but didn't get one until this past March, when 11 Italian immigrants were lynched by a frenzied mob in New Orleans in 1892 after being acquitted or mistried in the murder of the New Orleans police chief, a lynching that the New York Times celebrated, by the way, and prompted a diplomatic blow-up that brought Italy and the United States to the brink of war. The Italian government demanded federal action, and President Benjamin Harrison responded with a proclamation in 1892 announcing a one-time Christopher Columbus Day celebration of Italian heritage, which in 1971 became an annual federal holiday, a celebration that helped Americans to think of Italians not as black adjacent criminal element who came to take proper white Americans' jobs, but rather as white and acceptable. And Columbus Day isn't the only history thing that we tend not to learn the true origins of in school, even before Republicans started banning books. When we come back, what Americans also fail to recognize about our relationship to Europe.
Discomfort and strain. By Vizia, we see a better way.
Our roof got damaged during Hurricane Ida last August. We ended with Angie. Next thing we knew, we were put in contact with our Angie Pro, and then that weekend they came out and we had a brand new roof.
Get started at Angie.com today.
Some days it felt like asthma was holding me back, but asthma has taken enough. So I go triple.
With Trilogy. With 3 medicines and 1 inhaler, it's the only one-standing treatment for adults that takes triple action against asthma symptoms. Trilogy helps make breathing easier, improves lung function, and lasts for 24 hours. Go triple.
Go Trilogy. Because asthma has taken enough.
Trilogy won't replace a rescue inhaler for sudden breathing problems. Trilogy contains a medicine that increases risk of hospitalizations and asthma problems when used alone. When this medicine is used with an inhaled corticosteroid, like in Trilogy, there is not a significant increased risk of these events. Do not take Trilogy more than prescribed. Trilogy may increase risk of thrush and infections. Get emergency care for serious allergic reactions. See your doctor if your asthma does not improve or gets worse.
Don't let
asked jurors to sentence 24-year-old Nicholas Cruz to death, outlining gruesome details of how Cruz meticulously planned and carried out the 2018 massacre at Marjorie Stoneman Douglas High School.
AR-15 style rifle was right up against her chest and right up on her abdomen, right on her skin. She was shot 4 times and she died.
Taking the families of those killed down a horrific memory lane of the attack, minute by minute.
He researched prior mass shootings.
As Cruz looked on without emotion, the lengthy trial that began 6 months ago is drawing to a close.
He shoots her.
The prosecutor said proof of Cruz's intent to harm others could be found in his social media posts, pointing to his writing as, quote, a window to his soul, reading his YouTube comments in court.
I'm going to kill a ton of people and murder children. I love to see the families suffer.
Almost a year after Cruz pleaded guilty to killing 14 students and 3 school staff members in Parkland, Florida on Valentine's Day in 2018.
Dr. Scott asked the defendant, why'd you stop shooting? Couldn't find anyone else to kill.
The defense tried to persuade the jurors to spare Cruz's life, to consider his lifetime of struggles at home and in school, including claiming that he was born to a woman who abused drugs and alcohol while she was pregnant with Cruz, and being raised by a loving, single adoptive mother who was overwhelmed by caring for a child with special needs.
If we recognize what he really is, that damaged, brain damaged, broken, mentally ill person, it becomes a human issue. And every human life has value. I will.
Instead of taking his life, the defense wants jurors to sentence Cruz to life in prison without the possibility of parole.
Sentencing Nicholas to death will change absolutely nothing. It will not bring back those 17 innocent victims that he viciously murdered.
for Luke Hoyer.
The prosecutor ended his closing argument by reading each of the 17 victims' names out loud, urging justice for the dead.
The appropriate sentence for Nicholas Cruz is the death penalty.
And Aaron, at one point, the defense asked the jury to show Cruz mercy, something his own attorneys said that Cruz did not show some of his victims, pointing out that he walked up to some of them, shot them several times, just so that he knew they were dead. Deliberations will get underway tomorrow, and in Florida, a jury decision on death has to be unanimous, or Cruz will spend the rest of his life in prison. Aaron?
Thank you very much, Carlos. And next, a CNN exclusive. A protester in Iran reveals new details about the brutal crackdown he and others are facing right now.
And Iraq, everywhere like such as, and I believe that they should, our education over here in the U.S. should help the U.S. or should help South Africa and should help the Iraq and the Asian countries, so we will be able to build up our future for our.
Thank you very much, South Carolina. I'm not going to co-host it up now. Thank you very much, South Carolina. Am I being mean, Kaylee?
No, you're not. I mean, you're talking about a vice president who stood in South Korea and extolled our partners, the North Koreans. And I actually went on and looked at the White House transcript, and there's a line where it crosses out north because she meant to say south. But when you read that line, she just read it like a mechanical robot and didn't even stumble, didn't even question it, just went with the script. Because she needs to have a script. That's why she does late night television interviews, which, you know, all these late night television hosts outside of Greg Gutfeld look the same to me, seem the same to me, but I guess that was Seth Meyers she was with. And he asked questions and responded in the same manner as George Stephanopoulos or Chuck Todd or Margaret Brennan, which is a really sad indictment of the media, which is why we can have a vice president who makes mistakes and blunders like that. Beauty pageant contestant you just played.
Poor Miss South Carolina, that's going to live in infamy. What about when she said Trump broke the border and that she's just fixing it?
Right. That is unbelievable to me. I mean, we left a system, Jesse, that was intact. I mean, remain in Mexico, Title 42, the Mexican government putting thousands of troops on their northern border because President Trump said, hey, if you don't do something, I'm going to slap tariffs on you. So they moved and they acted. This is someone, I mean, that line she had, if you're a leader, participate in a solution. Well, she was dispatched to Europe to stop the Ukraine war. She couldn't do that. She was dispatched to the southern border one time to fix it. She couldn't do that. Voting rights, the list goes on. And so her only answer is to blame it on Trump. And Karine Jean-Pierre took the same failed talking point and reiterated it from the podium.
Now it looks like the Democrats want to legalize cannabis federally. Do you think that's going to play?
No, because everyone looking around New York City right now, smelling cannabis, by the way, while these crimes are being committed, that's the #1 priority. Our kids, kindergartners being taught sex in schools, unless you're in the state of Florida where we passed a law against that. Cannabis is not the top of mind of voters. Crime is #2. Education shortly thereafter. Yeah, top of mind, exactly. That was not intentional, but we'll go with that.
Have you seen the new Fetterman interview that we just played a couple minutes ago? He has to look on a screen to hear what people are saying. Will he, if he's elected, be able to carry screens around with him to answer questions from reporters or listen to people testifying in hearings?
No, of course not. You know, it made me, I was listening to the Fetterman interview and I was thinking about the candidate we faced when President Trump was running, Joe Biden, who literally was allowed to sit in a basement. If John Fetterman were in any other last cycle's election, 2016, he could have sat in his basement the way our president did, skirted through without these questions being asked, and maybe not become a president, but become a senator. But what worries me is back when this guy was totally lucid and totally and completely healthy, he was still letting murderers out of jail, like murderers who killed an elderly woman. So it wasn't good when he had all of his cognizance there, and quite clearly now he is not capable of being a United States senator. Like our president, not capable of being commander-in-chief, but he made it through thanks to COVID in a basement.
Well, even Fetterman, after the stroke, still makes more sense than Kamala Harris. Maybe not Miss Teen USA South Carolina, but he does make more sense than the vice president. Kaylee, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Kaylee just reminded me of something. I cannot walk out into Midtown Manhattan, the Upper East Side, especially downtown, without smelling the sweet, pungent fumes of cannabis. All different strains from all different places. It does relax you, but it almost relaxes you too much. They've just opened up a cannabis shop right next to my apartment, across from a church and across from a kindergarten. And I don't know what this world is coming to, but I did not see this coming. I'll just put it like that. Let's do some text messages. Mike from Florida says, hey, J-Dog, what's up? I heard Biden was also the first man in space. That's true. He beat Buzz Aldrin. Beth from Oshkosh, Wisconsin. Can you believe Oshkosh is actually a place? If my kid gets caught plagiarizing a paper, I'm not going to get mad anymore. He could be the next president of the United States. Attaboy, Johnny. You can do it. Kim from Tennessee isn't the reporter who called 911 violating Twitter's harassment policy. A Republican who did that would be kicked off the platform by now. Should we report him? Should we report him? Are we going to be like them? I don't think so. Rusty from North Carolina, if that unhinged reporter thinks waiting 10 minutes for a response is hard, he should try texting you. I've been trying since January to get a text on this show. I mean, it's not a child abuse hotline, but the phones are jammed. How you doing? Lacey from Florida, I'm 63 years old and would still consider myself a tomboy, but I'm not changing my gender. You don't have to. I'm just not going to arm wrestle you. Leland from Alabama, I just wanted to know why you stopped giving Johnny away for the day. HR? There have been multiple complaints from HR to HR about Johnny. I'm just not going to get into it. Okay? I'm not allowed to talk about it. Tucker's up next. DVRS. I'm Waters. This is my world.
Good evening and welcome to Tucker Carlson Tonight. So when Tulsi Gabbard won the Democratic Party's primary for a congressional seat in Hawaii 10 years ago, she effectively won the seat. Hawaii may be the most liberal out of all 50 states. It is a Democratic state. Flat out, it has not voted for a Republican presidential candidate in nearly 40 years. So if you get elected as a Democrat in Hawaii, it's not exactly breaking news. It's standard operating procedure. And yet when Tulsi Gabbard won that primary and then the seat, the Democratic National Party, deep interest in her, and you can see why. Here was a smart, appealing 31-year-old who knew what she believed and could explain it fluently. And by the way, she was also an Iraq War veteran. So in political terms, Tulsi Gabbard was near perfect, and they got it immediately. Barack Obama endorsed her right away. Nancy Pelosi called her personally and invited Tulsi Gabbard, did you remember this, to speak on the opening night of the Democratic National Convention. And then when she was sworn into Congress in January, the DNC named Tulsi Gabbard vice chair of the National Party. She just got in there, and she was vice chair of the DNC. And then, of course, the media played its prescribed role. If Nancy Pelosi likes you, well, so do they. So fawning profile after fawning profile emerged. If you lived in Washington at the time, you remember it very well. Here, ladies and gentlemen, the future of the Democratic Party, Tulsi Gabbard. In case you don't remember, here's a selection to jog your memory.
Watch out for the next superstar. There we go. You're talking about welfare. There we go. Tulsi Gabbard. Tulsi Gabbard is a rising star in this party. Tulsi Gabbard should be here tonight. The reality is we do not have enough young veterans in this party, enough young women in this party, enough people of color in this party.
You're considered a rising star in the Democratic Party. You had a position of leadership in the Democratic National Committee.
Tulsi's story is really, I think, tailor-made for Hollywood. I have to expect Natalie Portman to be vying for the role any day now, because this story is not to be believed.
Tulsi Gabbard, she is going to be the one to watch tonight at the DNC.
And Tulsi Gabbard, she's an Iraq War veteran. Yesterday, she was promoted from captain to major in the Hawaii National Guard. So she certainly is a rising star. The fact that she's out here tonight, for whatever reason, is unfair.
I don't know, but in a battle, I want her in my trench.
Me too.
Did you hear that? She's a rising star. Hollywood's going to make a movie about her. I want her in my trench. It's pretty hard to believe now, but that was the absolute consensus among Democratic Party sycophants until 2016. In 2016, as if by command from above, the fawning stopped abruptly, replaced initially by silence, and then by howls of scorned rage. So what happened in 2016? Well, Donald Trump was elected president. And then a few days later, displaying the independence of spirit that Democrats claim to love in young women, but actually despise more than anything, Tulsi Gabbard decided to talk to the new president about an issue that she cared about, which was U.S. policy towards Syria, a country that, again, Gabbard was virtually alone in pointing out has an awful lot of Christians in it, so maybe we should pay attention. As she put it at the time, quote, I felt it was important to take the opportunity to meet with the president-elect now, before the drumbeats of war that neocons have been beating drag us into an escalation of the war to overthrow the Syrian government. Ooh, you can't say that in Washington. Maybe she didn't know. But they told her, shh, stop. Let the adults do it. But Gabbard didn't seem to care. A few weeks later, she went personally to Syria. She was a member of Congress. You could do that. And she wanted to see conditions for herself. And then while she was there, she met with the Syrian president, Bashar al-Assad. That was it. It was over. Whether Tulsi Gabbard knew it or not, her career as a rising star within the Democratic Party came to a complete, abrupt, and final halt. She had done the one thing you're not allowed to do. She committed the one unforgivable sin, which is to question permanent Washington's foreign policy. You can't do that, and everyone knows it. And if you look around, you can see that no one does do it. They always tell you how radical Sandy Cortez is, Rashida Tlaib. Would they do that? No way. AOC may be a socialist, but in the end, she's with Bill Kristol and Liz Cheney on Team Raytheon. She does not cross that line because she's not allowed to. But Tulsi Gabbard is someone who had served in the U.S. military. In fact, was still serving in the U.S. military, was an elected member of Congress, decided, why shouldn't I say what I think? And so she did. And for doing that, overnight, her fellow Democrats accused Tulsi Gabbard, the combat veteran you'd want in your foxhole, of committing treason against the country she was serving. Hillary Clinton went even farther than that. Speaking of conspiracy nuts, Hillary Clinton way crazier than Alex Jones ever thought of being. She claimed the Russians were grooming Tulsi Gabbard as some kind of Manchurian candidate. You want to listen to lunacy? Listen to this.
I'm not making any predictions, but I think they've got their eye on somebody who's currently in the Democratic primary, and they're grooming her to be the third-party candidate. She's a favorite of the Russians.
Well, that's just completely whacked. Was she a crisis actor too? What a lunatic. But no one noticed because everyone was saying it. The LA Times, which at one point was an actual newspaper, accused Tulsi Gabbard of, quote, talking like a Russian asset, maybe a spy. So the years went by and Tulsi Gabbard decided to run for president, still as a Democrat, as she had been in her entire time in Congress. She'd always been a Democrat, of course, the vice chair of the DNC. And so she wound up in a presidential debate in October of 2019, and she responded to the smears against her. Watch this.
New York Times and CNN have also smeared veterans like myself for calling for an end to this regime change war. Just 2 days ago, the New York Times put out an article saying that I'm a Russian asset and an Assad apologist and all these different smears. This morning, a CNN commentator said on national television that I'm an asset of Russia. Completely despicable. As president, I will end these regime change wars by doing two things. Ending the draconian sanctions that are really a modern day siege, the likes of which we are seeing Saudi Arabia wage against Yemen, that have caused tens and thousands of Syrian civilians to die and to starve. And I would make sure that we stop supporting terrorists like Al-Qaeda in Syria, who've been the ground force in this ongoing regime change war.
They called her a Russian asset. Now that slur is so common that we don't really think about it, but think about it just for a second. This is a transparently patriotic person, an elected member of Congress who's serving in the U.S. Army, who's also, by the way, one of the nicest people in all of Washington, who is making traditionally liberal points about war. Not that all wars are bad or war is never necessary. She's participated in wars personally. She's merely saying, and has said dozens of times on television, that wars that don't benefit the United States are probably a bad idea for us to engage in. That's all she said. And for that, she was run out of town. But why is that? Why is that such an unacceptable thing to say? Well, of course, because there's a pattern here. Certain people do benefit from wars and they want more. So 3 years after that debate, another US-funded regime change war is underway. And that is exactly what's happening. This time, Our stated goal is removing not some third world dictator who might have WMD, but removing a guy with the world's largest nuclear stockpile, 6,300 nuclear warheads, Vladimir Putin. And once again, because Tulsi Gabbard has questioned the wisdom of this complete lunacy, Democrats are accusing her of working for Vladimir Putin. So if you want to know what the Democratic Party actually believes, don't listen to what they say. Oh, we want empowered women of color. We're also veterans. No, they don't. They want people who support regime change war. That's their red line. That's the one thing they will brook no dissent on whatsoever. They don't care what you think about that. They don't want to debate you on it. If you disagree or even ask questions, they go right to traitor. So today, Tulsi Gabbard did what is probably inevitable and probably has been since 2016. She left her own party, the Democratic Party. We don't have to guess as to why, because she explained it in some detail, and we ask you, please listen carefully to this because it's inspiring and interesting. And she did it on her new podcast called The Tulsi Gabbard Show. It launched today. Here she is.
I can no longer remain in today's Democratic Party. It's now under the complete control of an elitist cabal of warmongers driven by cowardly wokeness, who divide us by racializing every issue and stoking anti-white racism, who actively work to undermine our God-given freedoms enshrined in our Constitution, and who are hostile to people of faith and spirituality, who demonize the police, who protect criminals at the expense of law-abiding Americans, who believe in open borders, who weaponize the national security state to go after their political opponents, and above all, are dragging us ever closer to nuclear war. Now, these are some of the main reasons I'm leaving the Democratic Party.
So keep in mind, until today, this was a registered Democrat, office holder, standard bearer of the Democratic Party, the future of the Democratic Party from the country's most liberal state. This was a liberal Democrat. Did you hear that? Is there a single word you disagree with? Is there a single word that the Republican who represents you, who you send money to, who you vote for, would repeat in public? In other words, here you have someone who until yesterday was a member of the Democratic Party saying things the overwhelming majority of Republican voters believe, but only a tiny, a vanishingly small minority of Republican office holders are willing to say out loud because it's too scary. Oh, it just tells you so much. Tulsi Gabbard joins us tonight, and we're happy that she is. Tulsi Gabbard, thank you so much for coming on. That was quite a statement. I'm listening to this and I'm thinking, we have Republicans on the show from time to time. They don't put it as clearly and bravely as you do. So how do you feel? I mean, you've been in this party a long time. You were its future. You left. I mean, this has got to be kind of a fraught moment for you.
You know, Tucker, as you know, I've always been an independent-minded person. A Democrat, yes, but an independent Democrat. And my loyalties are very clear. I love our country. And I took an oath, both as a service member, as a soldier, as well as a member of Congress, to support and defend the Constitution. And that's an oath that I take extremely seriously. And so when you look at this party, today's Democratic Party is controlled by fanatical ideologues who hate freedom. They despise the Constitution. They actively find ways to undermine our God-given rights enshrined in the Constitution, like freedom of speech. If you say something and I say something that they don't like, instead of saying, you know what, agree to disagree, live and let live in the traditional liberalist kind of way, no, that's not good enough. They will do all that they can to destroy you, silence you, smear you, work with big tech, work with corporate media to actively destroy anyone who dares to even question their agenda. They are against freedom of religion. They are hostile towards people of faith, people who have their own spiritual practice, especially Christians, finding ways to be vindictive, to discriminate, to punish people who happen to exercise that freedom of religion. The list goes on, but the foundation of freedom is really what was at the heart of my making this decision, that I cannot be a member of a party that is against freedom and actively trying to undermine it.
Well, it was inspiring to hear that, but also disappointing. I feel like printing out your words and asking every Republican candidate who comes on this show to read them. If you can't read them, I'm not voting for you, right? I mean, why is it so hard to say out loud? First of all, the people who are always talking about racism are committing it. Why is that so hard for people to acknowledge? It's so obvious.
It speaks to the whole environment of fear that those in power, these elitists in power, have fomented, to where people are afraid to speak the truth. They're afraid to exercise their right to free speech because, hey, you might lose your job, you might be canceled, you might be trashed, and God forbid in Washington, you might not be invited to the cool kids parties. You might not be as popular. And this is really what it comes down to, is rather than taking a stand for peace, for prosperity, security, and freedom of the American people, we have too many people in Washington who are warmongers, subservient to the military-industrial complex, and continuing to put their own selfish interests or the interests of their donors first, with no mind for the costs and consequence that their decisions have on the American people. This is exactly what we're seeing right now with President Biden and leaders in Congress whose decisions are actively pushing us to the brink of a nuclear holocaust, of which they may have their bunkers where they'll be safe, but we, the American people, will have no shelter, no place to go, no place to hide, and face the consequences that could destroy all of humanity and the world as we know it.
You were the first person I heard say that back in February when this all started. I believed
Why
you.
I ran for president.
Well, it turns out you were absolutely right. Really quick, since you did serve for so many years in the Congress, in the party you just left, you know everybody, of course. Has anyone called you today, your former colleagues, Democrats, to say anything to you?
One got in touch with me and sent me a text message with 3 thumbs up.
I would love to know who that is, but I'm glad you're influencing people. Tulsi Gabbard, I'm not going to ask you what you're doing next. We will all watch, but I hope you'll come back on the show soon. Thank you.
I look forward to it. Thanks, Tucker.
Thank you. So it's only been a couple months, but you can still hear it in the back of your head, can't you? This is a pandemic of the unvaccinated. If you don't get the COVID vaccine, you're immoral. Then we found out the COVID vaccine doesn't actually prevent the transmission of COVID. Even Pfizer doesn't deny that. In fact, they knew that. And we know that they knew it because one of the company's executives just made a stunning admission about it. Not beating a dead horse here, it's kind of important. We've got the tails just ahead.
Reality may continue to shift. We've got our eye on the future of work, so you can focus on the present. At XChair, we're gazing ahead. And from where we sit, the future still feels good. Visit xchair.com today and get 50% off.
If you have a rash or other allergic reaction.
My relationship with my credit cards wasn't good. I got into debt in college, and no matter how much I paid, it followed me everywhere. Between the high interest, the fees, I felt trapped. So I broke up with my credit card debt and consolidated it into a local.
About a week later, her fiance, Lou, is sleeping on the couch. Then he wakes up with a start. And Donna said, "What's the matter, Lou?" He said, "I just had the weirdest nightmare. And that doll just started strangling me to death." And he was like scared at that moment. He says, "That's just a Raggedy Ann doll. That can't hurt anybody." And he throws it across the room. And as he did that, 7 slashes appeared on his chest and on his stomach. We call them psychic wounds. They come up with a plan to get a psychic in to find out what's going on with this doll. The psychic said, "There is a spirit of a young girl in that doll. She's 7 years old. Her name is Annabelle. She was killed outside of this apartment. Now she's in that doll." Now Donna and Lou are freaked out. So that's when they called in Ed. He came out with a ring. They did an exorcism of the apartment. And Ed said, "This doll does not belong here anymore. I'm going to put it in the museum for safekeeping."
The Warrens secured the doll in their museum, but it would appear Annabelle's evil deeds were far from over.
This priest that Lorraine knew very well, it was Father Bill. He was in the Hartford Diocese. He calls her up. He says, "Lorraine, can I look at that doll that puts slashes on people I heard about so much?" She says, "Come on over, but don't touch anything, Donna, because everything's dangerous." Ed shows him the doll. As Ed is talking about the slash marks, Father Bill picks up the doll with 2 hands and says, "God is more powerful than any devil or demon." Throws it across the museum floor. Ed's like beside himself. He's like, "Father, I told you don't touch anything. That doll is dangerous." The priest was
unconcerned, says his goodbyes to Lorraine. He never made it back to the rectory. Fortunately, the priest was not killed, but he was injured. The priest calls up, they had a priest said, "Ed, the last thing I can recall before that accident, I looked in the rearview mirror and I saw the doll staring back at me." You should never challenge the demonic. Why challenge something you know nothing about? Very dangerous.
Come check out the Warrens Occult Museum, where you can look at, but not touch, some of the most cursed items in the world and discover the doll that is anything but child's play.
There's a lot of paranormal activity out here.
There's a lot of energy through here on the spirit side.
Free from rare internal dissent by Monday's violence, perhaps, but still, Putin's rhetoric less fiery when he met the UN nuclear watchdog head today to discuss the front line in battle Zaporizhia nuclear power plant. Even he blamed everyone else for what he's been doing.
Of course, we see that today there are elements of excessively dangerous politicization of everything connected with nuclear activity.
Still, he'll meet his Turkish counterpart in Kazakhstan as his leading diplomat insisted they were not against talks with the West if offered.
This is a lie, I can tell you right away. We did not receive any serious proposals to enter into contact.
Again, a sign Russia, for all its violence and bombast, is not in a position of strength.
Nick, how's the Ukrainian air defense system holding up against these attacks?
Some interesting numbers today. Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky is saying that of the 28 cruise missiles fired at them on Tuesday, 20 were intercepted. We've also heard from the defense minister in just the last hours, Alexei Reznikov, saying that they say, already received a German air defense system called the IRIS-Ts, and that imminently they say they'll be getting a US and Norwegian one called the NASAMS. Now, it's unclear if the German one had any role in the air defenses today, but still, it does appear on both days about half of the cruise missiles fired at Ukraine were intercepted.
And what's Ukraine's energy minister saying about the damage done to the country's energy infrastructure?
Yeah, saying that about a third of it has been impacted over the past days. Now, we know that, of course, over the past weeks, months, Ukraine's infrastructure has been targeted already by the Russians, and so repairs can often be quite swift, but winter is approaching, and there is obviously clearly by Moscow a bid to degrade the ability for Ukraine to keep itself warm during these bitter winter months. I'll give you one note of optimism, though, in two instances. In fact, one place we were at in Dnipro yesterday ourselves, a crater caused by a cruise missile, well, that was filled in and covered over, and the road functional again by this morning. A similar scene in central Kiev. So Ukraine picking itself up very fast, despite, frankly, terrifying scenes over the past 48 hours, Anderson.
Very well, thank you. And joining us now, former Republican U.S. Senator Lynn Cohen, who served as defense secretary during the Clinton administration. Secretary Cohen, you heard President Biden characterize Vladimir Putin as a rational actor who totally miscalculated. Do you think he's a rational actor?
Well, I'm not in any position to judge anyone else's psychological state, but I think President Biden had it just about right. I think he was logical in the beginning and rational because he made assumptions that seemed rational. I have a big army, 10 times the size of the Ukrainians. I have 150,000 on the border. Ukraine will back down. The NATO alliance is not solid. The United States is divided from within. Those were all logical assumptions, but they were based upon a false premise. So it was rational in the beginning, and now the question is it rational to continue doing what he's doing because he's acting more and more desperate because he's losing on the ground. And that's why he's turning to firing missiles into residential areas.
Well, How much of this do you think is about the domestic audience at home? I mean, is he continuing the strategy of attacking civilians and infrastructure targets because he believes it's actually going to win the war for him, or because he just wants to satisfy, domestic concern?
I think both. I think he's reacting to the criticism coming from his right. At the same time, he's thinking he can knock out the energy supplies for Ukrainians during the winter months, that they will then fold, or the NATO nations will fold. So I think he's continuing to make these false assumptions where the Ukrainians are getting stronger, more motivated, and they're getting more defensive weapons to take his missiles out. And you have the British National Security Council basically saying that the Russians are running out of ammunition because it costs anywhere from $500,000 to $13 million to fire a cruise missile, depending on the size and capability. So there's a big expense involved from Russia. They may be running low on supplies, turning to North Korea, turning to Iran for assistance.
Is there any way to know, how long this goes on for? What do you look for to be able to judge where this war is going to go?
Well, I think the pedal to the metal policy has to be on the part of President Zelensky and the West, saying that we're going to send more and more Russian soldiers. Unfortunately, we're going to send them home either severely wounded or dead. And that's going to create even more opposition from within. Think of the image when Ukraine was under attack. President Zelensky said, please, all males stay home. Everybody up to the age of 60 or 65. President Putin said, I want to have a draft of 300,000. They headed 200, 300,000 are heading for other countries. So the image of Ukrainians standing to fight and the Russians taking off and fleeing to other countries, that tells you everything about where this is headed.
Ukrainian defense authorities, they've reported they've shot down roughly half of the missiles and drones fired by Russia over the past 2 days. Do you think more advanced air defense systems from the West, which it seems like are already in the pipeline, will help improve those numbers?
Oh, absolutely. The more sophisticated equipment we and others can provide is going to make it much more defensible, with fewer and fewer getting through the net. And again, a great cost to the Russians at this particular point. I think the danger, Anderson, is that Putin may become irrational at this point in time and saying, well, maybe I put a butcher in charge of my military, that will change things on the ground, and it won't. Or if it really gets bad, I'll turn to chemical, biological, or potentially nuclear weapons. That would be a catastrophic mistake for him to do that. So I think there's where you have to watch for the irrationality in a major way.
Cohen, I appreciate your time. Thank you so much. We have breaking news up next. A new report from the Washington Post on the abortion allegations against Georgia Senate candidate Herschel Walker, from the mother of one of his children. This coming just hours after 2 key Republicans joined him on the campaign trail, and he talked again about the allegations.
I and hundreds of thousands of Americans are doing, and just enjoy your life more.
Moving in the right direction. Senator Bernie Sanders, we will have to leave it there. Thank you so much for your time. Appreciate it. Thank you. Still ahead, he's a former Republican challenging a sitting Republican senator, and the race is much closer than you might think. Utah Independent Senate candidate Evan McMullin joins me live. That's next. Don't go away.
I'd like to try a Lavazza coffee, please. What is a Lavazza coffee?
Check it out. It's this one. Artfully blended. With Italian passion. Yes. Upgrade your morning coffee with Lavazza Classico by Lavazza.
Whenever heartburn strikes, get fast relief with Tums. It's time to love food back.
I have moderate to severe plaque psoriasis. Now, there's Skyrizi. With Skyrizi, 3 out of 4 people achieve 90% clear skin at 4 months after just 2 doses. Skyrizi may increase your risk of infections and lower your ability to fight them. Before treatment, your doctor should check you for infections and tuberculosis. Tell your doctor if you have an infection or symptoms, such as fever, sweats, chills, muscle aches, or coughs, or if you plan to or recently received a vaccine. Talk to your dermatologist about Skyrizi. Learn how AbbVie can help you save.
Hello, I'm Mike Lindell, and I'm excited to announce the original My Slippers are back in all sizes and styles. So go to mypillow.com or call the number on your screen now. Use your promo code and you'll get your very own My Slippers for only $49.98. That's $90 off and the biggest savings ever. What makes My Slippers different is my exclusive 4-layer design that you won't find in any other slippers. My Slippers' patented layers make them ultra comfortable, extremely durable.
I'm Ron Wyden, and I approve this message.
It was shocking to see the Supreme Court go this far.
6 judges took away every woman's right to make their own medical decisions.
And now extreme candidates in Oregon want to outlaw abortion here, even in cases of rape and incest.
But Senator Wyden is leading the fight for our right to choose, for access to birth control, and support for Planned Parenthood.
And that's why we need to keep him in the Senate.
Being assaulted at work is horrifying. I know because it happened to me. And when you're not supported, it's devastating. As Speaker, Tina Kotek blocked an investigation into repeated sexual abuse because she was worried about how it would make her look. She's been called a bully, willing to do anything to protect her power. But covering up sexual abuse because it might make you look bad? I'm a Democrat, but Speaker Kotek, we've all had enough.
Paid for by friends of Christine Drazen, PAC ID 19050.
Chair. Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson joins Jake. CNN Tonight with Jake Tapper, live tonight at 9.
There's breaking news from the Washington Post involving Georgia's Republican Senate candidate. The headline, woman says she had to press Herschel Walker to pay for abortion he wanted. The account reportedly coming from the mother of one of his children and a person that she confided in. Annie Linsky, one of the reporters on the Byline, joins us now. Appreciate you being here, Annie. Can you just walk us through your reporting tonight?
Yeah, thank you so much. Good to be here. We have learned and reported that Herschel Walker, of course, has said that he did not knowingly pay for an abortion for a woman who is also the mother of one of his children. But in speaking with that woman, she made the point that she had to repeatedly ask him for the money, which she was specifically saying was for the abortion. That's partially because she was in a difficult financial position at the time, having lost her job in the middle of the Great Recession, and the Washington Post reviewed a receipt of her bank account that showed she had less than $600 in her bank account at the time, which was part of why she was repeatedly pressing the football star for money.
And she says that she clearly said to him, "This is for an abortion."
Yeah, she did, and a person who she confided in at the time also said that. That person, it had really stuck in that person's head that this individual who was wanted her to have an abortion was being reluctant to provide the funds for it, and was given Walker's fame and a parent fortune at the time. Her friend was really surprised that it took so much effort to get him to pay for a procedure which he clearly had wanted her to have.
Yeah, I know the Post reviewed an image of the check the woman said that Walker sent to her. None of the outlets who have been reporting about this have ever published an image of that check. Do you know why? Because it would seem to be newsworthy, obviously, if it said Mr. Walker's signature on it.
Yeah, it's a image of it's from a ATM receipt. So it's when she deposited the check in her ATM, and in some banks, in this particular bank, when you go through that process, you get an image of the check sort of printed on the ATM receipt. So it's not an actual copy of a check; it's an image that was taken when she deposited it at her ATM, and it's at her request. She's made it clear that she does not want that particular document to be made public. I think she's worried about the sensitivity of financial information that's on it, and so we are honoring the request that she made.
Has Herschel Walker or his campaign responded to your reporting?
We sent them a series of questions this morning, and they did not provide an official response.
Annie Linsky, I appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
This breaking news from the Washington Post comes just hours after Walker got some help with the campaign trail from two key Republicans who talked about the allegations against him with ABC News. For more on that, I'm going to go to CNN's Eva McCann, who was at today's event outside Atlanta. So Herschel Walker spoke to ABC about the allegations. What did he say?
Well, Anderson, essentially, it is just a lot more of the same. He is flat out denying the core allegations here. Where he's adding to the record a bit is talking about this issue of fatherhood, saying despite the very searing allegations made by his son, Christian Walker, just last week, that he argues he has, in fact, been a present father. Let's take a listen.
As you well know, there is a woman who reportedly says that she was in a long relationship with you, has a 10-year-old son with you, that you paid for the cost of an abortion. Were you ever aware of her having an abortion?
I know nothing about an abortion. I know it's a lie. And I said it was a lie, and I just move on. So October surprise is not going to faze me.
I know initially last week you were saying you weren't even sure who the woman was. But
Which is true.
But at this point, you now know who she is.
Yes.
And have you had a conversation with her?
Not at all. So I didn't know who it was until last week. And I went, oh. And I said, that's not true. But they still ran with it. And so I said, that's not true. I said, that's a lie. I call it a lie. And right now, I said, I'm going to go back to campaigning. And people can continue to do whatever they want with the story.
If I can just get you to say a yes or a no, did you ever have a conversation with this woman at any time about an abortion?
No.
Did you ever, to your knowledge, give money to pay for the cost of an abortion?
No.
Is she lying?
Yes, she's lying. Yeah, she's lying. Yes, she's lying.
This same woman says that you have a 10-year-old son who you've only seen 3 times. Is that true?
Well, that's not true. I've seen him a little bit more than that. But that's one of the things I won't get into because they make it difficult for me to see him. And that's one thing I say I won't do. When he's young, I'm not going to sit there and make his life miserable.
Why is he coming out saying, don't try to pretend that you're a moral family man?
Well, like I said, I love Christian. And everyone that knows us know how much I love Christian, how much he's been with me, how much I've supported him, how much I've been with him.
But in fairness, let me just interrupt one second, because loving somebody, you can love them from afar, but it's different to be present and involved.
That's what I'm saying. People know I've been present with Christian.
So when he says that you were an absent father, that's not a fair critique.
Oh, that everyone knows that's not. People that know me know that's not.
So you hear their continued flat-out denials, even as this unnamed woman is adding more details to her account in various news outlets. It's really up to the Georgia voters to decide who they believe.
Republican Senators Rick Scott of Florida, Tom Cotton of Arkansas, they campaigned for Walker today. I know you spoke to voters at the rally. What did they tell you?
Yeah, so this was really very, I think, enlightening, Anderson. You speak to people here, and they are not having this conversation at all about these allegations. They are very enthusiastic about Walker, conservatives in this state. They talk about how he is a born-again Christian, how they believe him, how they're actually motivated to come out to rallies like the one today based on some of these negative headlines. They are suspicious of the timing. There was a long line wrapped around this parking lot earlier today with people waiting for handshakes, hugs, pictures, signing of footballs that they've grown. So that, I think, is a component that is important not to miss. There was one split ticket voter. One man told me that he is going to be voting for incumbent Governor Brian Kemp, along with Democratic Senator Raphael Warnock, that these recent allegations were just a bridge too far, but he seemed to be the outlier. Take a listen.
I probably am doubtful with some of the allegations that they've come out so late into the game.
I feel like if that did happen, which I don't think it did, why do you have to go to the news? Why not have worked that out with him?
If you just own up to him, but not telling the truth about him.
So all eyes now, Anderson, turn to the debate on Friday in Savannah. I'm curious to see how much this conversation that is really a national conversation is going to be a feature of this debate, or how much they will get into other issues, far over other issues. I will tell you, leading a lot of the local newscasts here in Georgia is this issue of crime. Anderson?
Even McCann, appreciate it. Thank you. Just 1 month until midterms, and Republicans, as Ethan was pointing out, are focusing on crime and policing and attacks on Democrats. In a moment, CNN Jeff Zeleny takes a look at some key races where crime is seen as a winning issue by Republicans. That's next.
I shot a
campaign and have endorsed me. It's not too late, Mitt. You can join the party. I'd welcome you to do so, because otherwise you'll be stuck with 2 more years of Chuck Schumer being the leader and 2 more years of Joe Biden having unfettered rule over the United States Senate without any Republican backstop.
I mean, this is a guy, Pierre Delecto, who marched with Black Lives Matter, which hates the nuclear family, and endorsed riots. Like, I think he's gone insane. In my view, not yours. But Senator Mike Lee, I appreciate your coming out and saying it's an amazing story that we were not aware of. Thank you.
Thank you.
So the first thing you hear if you complain about rates of illegal immigration is, shut up, they're way better than you. Illegal aliens have lower crime rates than you do, than native-born Americans. Oh, that's actually not true. Like a lot of things, it's just a flat-out lie with the numbers to prove it straight ahead.
Where the windows are always Pella. Pella's fiberglass is the strongest material for windows and patio doors. The fiberglass frame is even scratch and dent resistant. Pella windows, tested for extremes, designed for your home.
This is a chemical warfare on our country.
You have to have strong men. If you don't, it's not going to go well. What's wrong with our food is that it's not food and reliant on industrial processes.
For many of these compounds, there's clear evidence that some of these chemicals causes problems with reproduction.
Picking something hard to do every day will increase your testosterone. We need a renaissance.
Getting into a healthier state, being a healthier person, that's when you really start to see improvement.
No one in Washington seems interested at all. It's a joke to them.
If men can't reproduce, then the world's over.
We're headed for a calamity.
Hey Frank, how you doing?
Andy Pettitte is one of America's greatest pitchers that has played for the New York Yankees. He has never forgotten what happened on September 11th. To this day, he continues to support those who sacrificed so much for us.
Have been willing to not only get tested, but spread the word in every way possible and put some of their own time and money into this.
I know that she's very grateful because our hearts are just tied since being best friends forever. And of course she says thank you.
On behalf of Rice Home Furniture and NBC 16, we like to acknowledge individuals doing good in our community and to donate to this to Lori and all of you to help with the signs and getting the word out. This will do another billboard.
Yeah.
And Dawn has already been on dialysis for almost 4 years. The average person will only live on dialysis for 5 to 8 years. She and her friends are hopeful the perfect match will turn up soon. And if you know someone who should be recognized for their acts of kindness, let us know. You can click on the nomination form link at the top of the story on our website. Go to NBC16.com/AOK.
And now weather with meteorologist Jennifer Herbert.
Air quality throughout the area looking much better than what we saw out there yesterday. Currently, most of our viewing area is sitting in the good air quality zone. Now, Oak Ridge, we've seen an improvement to unhealthy from very unhealthy, and hopefully we can continue to see a little bit more improvement with that as we move through the evening. Now, the smoke is going to be an issue for us. We do have that air quality warning that has been extended now until Wednesday, and it's because we have this northerly component to the wind still filtering in smoke from Washington, and then down in Roseburg also dealing with smoke from our Cedar Creek fire. Now, temperatures today a little milder than yesterday, a little more comfortable. 76 the high in Roseburg, 74 here in Eugene, 73 in Corvallis, and the coast sitting in the low to mid 60s. Our temperatures haven't fallen really at all. Junction City sitting at 71, Roseburg still at 76, and along the coast still in the low to mid 60s. Now we have this high pressure still sitting over us, still blocking any low pressure systems from moving through our area. That's why we've been dry for almost 2 weeks now. Now we are going to see this high pressure push to the northeast, and behind it, some low pressure. And this could bring us some rain and relief as we get into next week. All right, so looking at satellite radar, we're all clear out there, seeing a little light cloud coverage off the coast. And we're really going to remain clear overnight, waking up tomorrow to sunshine and maybe a stray cloud or two as we go overnight into Wednesday. We're going to see some cloud coverage build along the coast, possible slight chance of a drizzle, but the valley remains clear. We're going to see a lot of sunshine moving through our extended forecast as well. Temperatures tonight will fall from the mid 40s to the mid 50s. And tomorrow we're going to see a small jump in temperatures. They'll return to the 80s in the valley and upper 60s, low 70s along the coast. Here's a look at that extended forecast. As I mentioned, more mild throughout the day. Still, we are above average. And going into Monday and Tuesday, I gave the Coos Bay area that small chance of rain, but we could see that push moving back to the 70s. That's a look at your forecast.
All right, thank you so much, Jennifer. Well, coming up on your only local news at 5:30, the owner of a prominent professional soccer teams at Oregon is stepping down. Plus, actress Angela Lansbury is being remembered tonight. More on her life and career. And then coming up tonight on NBC Primetime, The Voice kicking off things with the battle rounds at 8 p.m., followed by La Brea at 9 and New Amsterdam at 10, and then stay up for NBC 16 News at 11.
So where do you find information about paying for medical treatment after a car crash? Easy. Just go to Lettuce.
Outlaw abortion here, even in cases of rape and incest. But Senator Wyden is leading the fight for our right to choose, for access to birth control, and support for Planned Parenthood. And that's why we need to keep him in the Senate.
John Carter Cash is the only son of Gene Carter and Johnny Cash. Imagine that childhood. Well, he's working on a new documentary about it. The documentary is called Johnny Cash, The Redemption of an American Icon, coming out later this year. We just spoke to John Carter Cash for a brand new episode of Tucker Carlson Today. He tells us about the last part of his father's life and his fate.
In the face of his struggles, he didn't only endure, but he quadrupled his efforts, and he made arguably some of the best music of his life.
Yes, he did.
In the last part of his life. You can hear the frailty. You can hear the fact that he knew he was broken and that he was going to be able to get back up in many ways. You can hear that in his voice. But there's something else there. You can hear the tenacity. You can hear the endurance. You can hear the almost preternatural strength that was rising in him to continue his creativity. He lost his eyesight in the last part of his life. And, and yes, a lot's brought on by his own nature. But the way he lived while he was dying was a testament to the human spirit. And so, I carry that with me. But it all comes back around to his faith. He had that sense of peace. And for one thing, it's like he was never angry with God. One of his favorite books from the Bible was the book of Job. And like unto Job, Dad was surrounded by loss of his brother when he was a child, the loss of his wife towards the end of his life. Something that devastated him that he never got over. But he never cursed God for that. And he always, I think he had a sense of peace and understanding that this was grace, this was life. But it didn't mean that we didn't go without struggles, that we didn't go without pain, that we live on a fallen plane. And but he had a way of showing that kindness and that love and that connection with the Spirit to everyone in his life.
How he lived while he was dying revealed who Johnny Cash really was. That's true of many people. It's a great conversation. You can see the whole thing in Tucker Carlson Today on FoxNation.com. So, in the immediate aftermath of Hurricane Ian, the governor of Florida, Ron DeSantis, announced the arrest of 4 looters. 3 of them were here illegally.
We've had 4 looters that were arrested, I guess a couple of days ago, and they need to be brought to justice, and we're not going to tolerate it. But 3 of the 4 are illegal aliens. And so these are people that are foreigners. They're illegally in our country. And not only that, they try to loot and ransack in the aftermath of a natural disaster.
So you come to the country illegally, you break it all, you get here, and you start stealing when you get here? Really, it's really too much. How common is this? Because it is insulting in addition to everything else. We don't really know because most states do not identify illegal aliens when they're arrested. So you don't know how often they commit crimes. And there's a point, of course, a political point in hiding that from you. But a new analysis from the Center for Immigration Studies looked more deeply into it, and we can tell you the results of that study exclusively tonight. CIS found that illegal immigrants in Texas, for example, quote, appear to be convicted of crimes such as homicide, sexual assault, and kidnapping at higher rates than the state average. For example, in one recent year, the homicide conviction rate for illegals in Texas was 3.3 per 100,000. That was much higher than the state's overall rate, which is 2.9. These are meaningful numbers, and they demolish the talking point that's often thrown at you when you bring up this topic. Sean Kennedy was lead researcher on this for the Center for Immigration Studies. He joins us tonight. Sean, thanks so much for coming on. How did you find these numbers, which have been hidden?
Well, a number of studies had been done by first the Libertarian Cato Institute and then repeated by the Washington Post, the New York Times, debunking the notion that illegal immigrants commit any crime for that matter. And I was just curious, and my lead authors were curious as well, as to what the actual data said. And we found out that the data was being absolutely misrepresented. They claimed that native-born Americans could be compared apples to illegal immigrants, except for Texas doesn't collect data on native-born Americans. That's some other category, which includes unidentified illegal immigrants. And every year, especially in serious crime categories, Texas keeps finding more illegals in its prisons that weren't identified initially upon arrest. So there's more and more illegals amongst the convicted felons in Texas when Texas goes back and checks on people's immigration status.
So the Cato study was a lie, and yet, as you said, it was weaponized immediately by the usual liars to shout down anyone who said, well, maybe we shouldn't have open borders.
Absolutely, it was a mischaracterization because you used to be entitled to your own opinions, but not your own facts. But now you're entitled to your own facts, but not your own opinions. And that's where we stand, is that one of these lies gets halfway around the world before we get our pants on with the truth. And that's where we stand on illegal immigration and crime, because a subsequent study by the University of Wisconsin also confirmed Cato's analysis, except for it made even more egregious methodological errors and mischaracterized more data about illegal immigrants and what Texas collects. And we spoke to Texas Department of Public Safety at length and got the original data they used, and it just doesn't say what they said it says. It doesn't include the categories that they represent in their papers.
Well, that makes sense, that people willing to break immigration law will break other laws. I mean, most normal people would not break immigration law. If I said, hey, Sean, why don't you and I sneak into Japan? They've got a high standard of living, good food, you can ride the subway without getting murdered. Let's sneak in. You would say, we can't because it's against the law, right? So it takes a certain sort of person to sneak into a country, does it not?
Absolutely. It also takes a certain kind of country to allow people to come in with impunity and not hold them to account. At the end of the day, we don't know how many people in our prisons, though some estimates by the Bureau of Justice Statistics say that 1 in 5 prisoners in California is illegal, 1 in 10 in Oregon, 9% in Massachusetts. So we know that they're non-citizens in our prisons. How they got there, why they're still here, are questions we need to answer. But the only way we can answer those is if we have the truth out there. And unfortunately, the media and some supposed research institutions are hell-bent on misleading us because they want to push forward their policy, facts be damned.
Yeah. It's a pandemic of the infection. Yeah. A lot of lying about numbers. Sean Kennedy, I appreciate you're actually getting to the truth. Thank you.
Thank you, Tucker.
So do you remember this guy, the hatchet in McDonald's guy, threatening ladies with a hatchet? Well, he's out of jail. Never went to jail, but he's back in trouble. I'll tell you how next.
Frozen raw and cooked diets for dogs and cats, too.
I got more than I'll think again.
Receiving the text for help, they spotted the men from the air, 25 miles off the Louisiana coast. By now, it was around noon on Sunday. One man was hoisted up to the chopper, with the help of a rescue swimmer.
The fixed-wing aircraft saw the other two men floating about a mile away. That's when we sprung into action and sped the boat up to go get these guys. We pulled up to them, and they were getting harassed by sharks when we pulled up.
He says the sharks were about 4 feet long.
One of the men had been bitten up on his hand, as you saw, and was bleeding into the water. His life jacket, his orange life preserver, had been ripped about halfway down by the fish. So we got him on board first, pulled him out of the water.
All 3 fishermen suffered from hypothermia.
They had multiple lacerations on their hand, almost down to the bone. We actually were able to recover one of the life jackets that had been eaten through by a shark.
A nightmare fishing trip with a happy ending, one these men will never forget.
Well, that is terrifying. Randy Kidd joins us now. Do we know how they're doing tonight?
Well, Anderson, they were all taken to University Medical Center in New Orleans. They are recovering, albeit slowly, but it's really incredible because the Coast Guard says that these guys did everything right. They tied themselves together and they tied themselves to that cooler, which of course had some water in it, so they were able to stay hydrated. But just imagine this scenario. They had the sharks swimming around them, 3 to 5 foot waves. They were 25 miles off the coast. They had no idea how far they were from land, and they had no idea if anyone was ever going to come get them. So it truly is an incredible story of survival.
Yeah, Randy, appreciate it. Thank you. Up next, remembering the legendary Angela Lansbury.
Biggest bath sale ever. Get my 6-piece towel sets for the lowest price ever.
John Fetterman is either healthy and he's dodging the debates because he does not want to answer for his radical left positions, or he's too sick to participate in the debate.
Rebecca, I know that in the modern GOP, the cruelty is the point, but for a doctor to be mocking or weaponizing an opponent's health is pretty damn cruel and cynical, is it not?
Yeah, it's horrifying. It's incredibly Trumpian. He is a doctor. Now, he's also a doctor who then built a lot of his career and his power and his name, which he's now leveraging for this campaign, on being a television doctor who promoted medically questionable supplements sort of aimed at women, many of them weight loss drugs. You know, his actual record around medical transparency is pretty grim at this point. But no, the cruelty is incredible. And his spokesman, you know, when I called Dr. Oz's spokesman for a response to my Fetterman story, and I brought up the mocking tone, you know, the Fetterman spokesperson didn't back away from it. He said, we told him to eat his vegetables. I mean, it was this incredibly anti-science, anti-medical cruelty, you know, aimed to make an opponent who is clearly, again, getting better and better week by week in front of millions of people, you know, to make him seem weak. And it was incredibly cruel and having nothing to do with a doctor's responsibility.
We also shouldn't forget that Dr. Oz is the TV doctor who helped massage Trump's own medical records or medical information back in 2016. John Fetterman still leads Oz in the polls narrowly. The race is tightening. Why do you think that is? Do you think, as Politico reported yesterday, that the Dobbs decision is fading in terms of the impact on the Democratic grassroots side?
Well, I think that there is always going to be a narrowing in polls, right? This always happens in the weeks before an election, right? Partisan loyalties kick in. Republicans who hadn't necessarily been warm about Oz, through the summer, a lot of them were going to come home, as they say, right? And this was going to get to be a tighter race. One of the things I've noticed, I was reporting this story as those polls were really tightening. As of now, they seem to have stabilized a little bit, and it's always tough. You know, I'm always dubious about polling at this juncture, so I think it's tough to say. But I think that the tightening was natural, and I also think, I mean, I was watching just zillions of right-wing dollars stream into Pennsylvania Airways, and those things have an impact. You know, that's something that was very clear that the right-wing super PACs, including some aligned with Mitch McConnell, were just flooding Pennsylvania's airwaves with attack ads on Fetterman throughout the month of September, and I think that probably had an impact too.
So Bernie Sanders was on our show earlier tonight. He is arguing that it is a mistake for Democrats running for office to focus only on abortion in these upcoming midterms. Does he have a point that the economy is still a huge, very daily issue for millions of Americans, and Democrats can't afford to ignore it?
I think that I agree with Bernie a little bit in that what he wrote in his Guardian article was that there was an attitude that Democrats could just coast on abortion into the elections. And as somebody who's been very critical of how Democrats have talked about abortion over decades, I have some sympathy for that because I have seen this summer, post-Dobbs and more importantly post-Kansas, a little bit of this attitude that if we just say the word abortion, abortion, abortion over and over again, that'll be it. But where I differ with Bernie is I don't think you can silo abortion off from economic issues. One of my frustrations with how Democrats have talked about abortion for years is that there hasn't been acknowledgement that abortion is absolutely an economic issue tied into paid leave, higher wages, child care, college costs, affordable housing, health care. All those economic issues are one and the same with reproductive health care and access.
It's a very good point there. There's the false distinction between abortion rights, economic rights, and the false distinction between, as we've discussed before on this show and other shows, between kitchen table issues and democracy, which is also a kitchen table issue. Everything's a kitchen table issue. Rebecca Traister, thank you so much for your time and for your reporting. Much appreciated.
Thank you.
And this quick programming note, John Fetterman is going to be interviewed by Lawrence O'Donnell on The Last Word in just over an hour. Don't miss that. That is all in on this Tuesday night. Alex Wagner Tonight starts right now.
McDonald's. Who's got that going for him? It's on his LinkedIn page. I'm the man who did not chuck those people in the post. We're going to try and get in touch with that man, book him on our show, and ask him, why don't you chuck up those people in McDonald's? Oh, say, Matt, great to see you tonight. Thank you. And we'll be back 8 p.m. tomorrow night. In the meantime, here's Sean.
He didn't chop them up because he didn't want to.
He didn't want to. Just didn't want to.
This is a scary world. Anyway, thank you, Dapper. Welcome to Hannity Tonight. Former Congresswoman Tulsi Gabbard. She's not the only person leaving the Democratic Party with less than a month to go until the midterms. As a matter of fact, it's 28 days. Democrats are now hemorrhaging support from the African-American community and the Hispanic American community. Now, we'll have full analysis straight ahead and a debate with our friend Dr. Cornel West, plus Indiana congressional candidate Jennifer Ruth Green will be here to respond to a horrible smear campaign against her, including a disgusting attempt by some Democrats to attack Green because she was sexually assaulted. She was a victim, even after she requested that her privacy be respected. She'll tell her story. And tonight, Dr. Phil will join us on a very controversial show he did on the issue of cancel culture. Here's a preview of that.
Nowadays, you better watch what you say because there is always someone in person or online who will tell you, you can't say that. It's problematic.
Now, our friend Dr. Phil will be here in just a moment. We'll talk about that show and more. First, another day, another scandal for Georgia Senator Raphael Warnock, as his ex-wife once pointed out that Warnock is a great actor, but doesn't appear to be a very good person. Tonight, a brand new ad featuring newly uncovered body cam footage sheds new and a disturbing light on the domestic dispute between Warnock and his ex-wife. As you watch this, ask the question, why wasn't Warnock arrested? Take a look.
And he just starts backing the car up. I just can't believe he would run me over. I've tried to keep the way that he acts under wraps for a long time, and today he crossed the line. So that is what is going on here, and he's a great actor. He is phenomenal at putting on a really good show.
When such allegations are usually made, often there is an arrest. My question tonight is, why wasn't Raphael Warnock arrested? Why didn't the cop arrest him when his wife said all of this? Why is the media, especially in the state of Georgia, covering for Warnock? Sadly, that was not Warnock's only run-in with the law. As a matter of fact, this year he was ordered by a Superior Court judge to attend mediation after he was accused of neglecting his very own children, failing to pay child care expenses, despite amassing a net worth of nearly $1 million. And in 2002, as a minister in West Baltimore, Warnock was arrested for obstructing a police investigation into child abuse at his very own church camp, according to the Baltimore Sun.
He blocked police from interviewing camp counselors, and one trooper stated, quote, "I've never encountered resistance like that at all." Ultimately, Warnock himself was not convicted of any crime, but 5 cases of child abuse were in fact brought against the camp director. This is Warnock's camp. Warnock was clearly trying to protect not only the camp, but that director. Again, where is the media demanding answers? If it was Herschel Walker, you know that they would be demanding answers, hence the double standard in the media. Now, one former camper claiming that Warnock's counselors tossed urine on a 12-year-old boy, made others sleep outside in the cold without any shelter whatsoever. So, Georgia, is that really the guy you want representing you in the U.S. Senate? A lot of attacks going against Herschel Walker. All's fair, love, war, and politics, right? A guy who calls police thugs and gangsters, a guy that wants to end all cash bail, a guy that voted for massive tax increases while using a loophole to skip out of paying his own taxes, a pastor that wants no restrictions on abortion, a guy that praises the virulent anti-Semitic and racist Louis Farrakhan, praises Reverend Wright, GD America, not God bless America, praise the murdering thug dictator Castro. And meanwhile, the Democratic Senate candidate in Pennsylvania, well, he isn't any better. Trust fund brat in a hoodie, who never worked a job in his life, John Fetterman, well, he might even be worse. Not only is Fetterman a lifelong deadbeat socialist with radical positions, but a recent stroke has left him severely disabled. It was on full display on NBC tonight. Take a look.
We had a monitor set up so that he could read my questions because he still has lingering auditory processing issues as a result of the stroke, which means he has a hard time understanding what he's hearing. Now, once he reads the question, he's able to understand. You'll hear he also still has some problems, some challenges with speech. And I'll say, Katie, that just in some of the small talk prior to the interview, before the closed captioning was up and running, it did seem that he had a hard time understanding our conversations. And we've asked multiple times for medical records. We've asked for interviews with someone from his medical team. Those requests have so far been denied to NBC News and other outlets that have requested this.
Now, by the way, that was on MSDNC. They're even raising concerns. Now, to be fair, we wish Fetterman a full recovery. But the U.S. Senate is a big job with a ton of responsibility. The voters of Pennsylvania deserve to see Fetterman's medical records, and John Fetterman needs to stop hiding from Dr. Oz. Early voting has been going on for weeks in Pennsylvania, and he refuses to debate Dr. Oz until the last week of October. Now, it's pretty obvious John Fetterman is not mentally capable of debating. You decide. Take a look.
Should Joe Biden run again in 2024?
I think that should be a decision made by Joe Biden.
Joe Biden, okay, just like he said, the other comment about kicking, and I won't say it again because I got in trouble for saying it the other night. Some people were upset. Anyway, John, if you are wrong, if we're wrong, and you're capable of being senator, you can come on this show. We'll give you a full hour, or at the very least, show up for a debate with Dr. Oz. More than one. You said that candidates should do 3 debates. Here now with more on both these races. South Carolina Senator Lindsey Graham, Senator. It's a pretty dark business you chose to be in, I'll say that. But it is what it is. And, I know the gloves are off against Herschel Walker. He's denied the allegation about the abortion. There's another controversy with Warnock's church and kicking people out of some housing that they have. And Herschel's offered to pay back rent if need be for some of those people. But you see Warnock, you see his record, and you see the attacks only on Herschel. Why is that?
Because the road to the majority runs to Georgia. Democrats know that. The media knows it. I learned something. I didn't know what you said until tonight. I didn't know this about Warnock. I just heard it tonight. Well, I bet nobody in Georgia knows it, because if you're waiting on the media to tell you about what's going on in Georgia, other than destroying Herschel Walker's life, you're going to wait a hell of a long time. Remember Kavanaugh? Remember how they played the game right at the end? They come up with some letter, take the guy blindside, another allegation, trying to drive him out. Well, he stood in there, and I tell you what, Herschel's going to stand in there too. So this needs to be an ad. What you said needs to be turned in an ad. It's $2 million a week to run one ad in Georgia, teamherschel.com. Warnock has raised $90 billion.
Herschel's raised $30 million. Every liberal in the country is all in to make sure Warnock wins in Georgia. We need to be all in for Herschel. So let's raise some money tonight, teamherschel.com, to take what you said and tell Georgia about Warnock, because if we don't turn it into an ad, you're never going to know it.
Well, I didn't know, Senator, that in a domestic dispute that somebody can make an allegation that the spouse tried to run you over with a car and that person didn't get arrested. I would think that if you're covering up an investigation into child abuse and you obstructed justice in that case, and in fact it did happen, and you ran the camp, how come the people of Georgia don't know that? How is it possible he got a Superior Court ruling and got dragged into court for not paying child support? For all this stuff that's been said about Herschel Walker, and some of it he says is absolutely not true, where's Warnock ever being asked a single question about any of it?
Well, he's never going to be asked. I hope we have a debate. We're going to have one debate Friday night. I hope this is brought up. But here's Herschel's problem. He's being outspent 3-1. He needs to run ads talking about Warnock voting against border security and increasing the IRS by 87,000 votes. He needs to run ads telling the people in Georgia that Warnock has shut down domestic oil and gas production in the United States, make us more dependent on foreign oil and gas. And he also needs to tell the story about the double standard here. This October surprise against Herschel, you think that's an accident? They waited this long to drop it right before the election. So here's what you can do to help Herschel Walker and to help your own family. If you live in Georgia, vote for Herschel. Tell your friends to vote for Herschel. If you don't have a friend, go make one. If you don't live in Georgia, you can tell people you know in Georgia to vote for Herschel. But all of us can send some money tonight to teamherschel.com so we can run 2 ads, not 1.
Warnock's money is not coming from inside of Georgia. I hope the people of Georgia know that.
None of it.
Yeah. All right, Senator Graham.
None of it. It's coming from the same damn people that tried to destroy me, and we're not going to let it happen. Teamherschel.com. Let's fight fire with fire.
Senator Graham, thank you. We now turn to a big story out of Alaska, where the out-of-touch leftist center politician Lisa Murkowski is in big jeopardy tonight of losing her job to an actual real conservative Republican endorsed by President Trump, Kelly Chewbacca. She is now up by 9 points in the latest poll. She joins us now. Alaska GOP Senate candidate Kelly Chewbacca is with us. Even 538 has you winning this race now. What has changed?
I'm so excited to be with you, Sean. And Alaskans are saying across the state, I've knocked thousands of doors. It's time for a change. And as soon as these polls came out, Mitch McConnell and his Senate Leadership Fund came up here and started flooding our state with millions of dollars in a smear campaign against me, full of lies. I've got documentation proving all of these campaign smear ads are lies. And I think that that also has galvanized our base, because we don't like it when dark money from the lower 48 comes in and tells us who we're supposed to elect. The Alaska Republican Party has censured Murkowski. They've removed her from membership. We know she's a Democrat. She votes with the left. She's given Biden tie-breaking votes that have helped to pursue this energy annihilating agenda and cut our jobs up here in Alaska, voting for radical gun control and red flag laws, and that doesn't go over well up here. Alaskans are really motivated for a change, but these smear ad campaigns, I think, have definitely helped us. This is money that he could put in to help Georgia and Pennsylvania and Arizona, where we could flip seats and pick them up. But instead, we're doing a Republican on Republican fight.
Because the Republicans in Alaska have chosen you and are choosing you over Lisa Murkowski. Why is Mitch McConnell involving himself in an intramural battle like this when you would be a great senator for the people of Alaska? You believe in energy independence. You believe in secure borders. You believe in law and order. I've looked at your record. I've interviewed you now at least 4 or 5 times between radio and TV. You are a rock-solid conservative. And the people of Alaska, your message is resonating with them. They don't need to hear from Washington and Mitch McConnell, the Kentucky senator, weighing in with millions of dollars that he's getting from inside the party to fight against the party.
I think there's 2 reasons. I suspect that he'd rather have a minority he can control rather than a majority he can't. And my entire background is in holding government insiders accountable, exposing waste, fraud, and abuse, and making government work for the people instead of against the people. And I suspect Mitch McConnell and these Washington, D.C. insiders I don't know that they'd like it so much to have me in there working for the people of the United States of America and making government work for them. I suspect, just like we've been exposing throughout this year, there's a populist movement coming across the United States. You've talked about it. There's third wave of conservatism. And I don't know that they like it so much. There's going to be a sea change in Congress, and the establishment's going to get a little bit ruffled. These DC insiders are going to see a new class of freshmen come in that are of the people, by the people, for the people. And with 2 decades of experience making government work for us, it's a change.
Well, as this Mitch McConnell money flows into Alaska, I want the people of Alaska to know that you have the right to pick your own Republican senator, and he's the minority leader, and he has no business weighing in this primary at all whatsoever. And I hope that you win this race. Thank you for being with us. Kelly Chewbacca. All right, as we continue, joining us now with more, former Speaker of the House, Fox News contributor,
took an adversarial position with this woman who was, looking for answers.
Yeah, I mean, indifference is one word for it, but I think what is so striking to someone on the outside of this is that there's a reporting today that on January 6th, McCarthy is on the phone with President Trump saying they're trying to effing kill me. This is someone who's terrified for his own life. And then in the subsequent days, can't acknowledge to you or publicly what happened that day. I mean, is that indifference, or is that aiding and abetting someone who is trying to tear down democratic institutions? I guess I just wonder if I would describe more nefarious motives to someone who so clearly understood the stakes that day, the danger, the peril, not just individually, but to the country. And then in the months since has done anything but lead on the issue.
I mean, I would describe it as that. I don't know if it rises to the level of, criminal culpability.
And I'm not suggesting criminal culpability, but
certainly, there's a moral and ethical obligation that I believe that our politicians have. And, Kevin McCarthy has failed to meet that threshold, I think, time and time again. It's disappointing.
But did any of it shock you after you left those meetings, effectively having failed in your quest?
I don't know if I failed in my quest necessarily with those events. I mean, I went there. I met with Kevin McCarthy. I had an opportunity to speak with him. I recorded that conversation.
Yeah.
And I was able to expose, elements of his indifference. And, what I saw is a calculated approach to the events of January 6th. Like, let me assure you, and there are people out there that are much better versed in Kevin McCarthy than me, but Kevin McCarthy really wants to be Speaker of the House, and he will do anything to be Speaker of the House. He's not concerned about his legacy. He's only concerned with retaining power and obtaining that position. And so what he did was, in the immediate aftermath of January 6th, he saw it for what it was. He voiced that, vocalized it on the House floor. And then when he realized that it was going to be politically disadvantageous to stay that course, he reversed course, went down to Mar-a-Lago, kissed Trump's ass, and now we're seeing, a very different approach to what January 6th was from him and the rest of the Republican Party.
Yeah, I mean, the polling on this is shocking, that the Republicans on whole are more prone to believe that January 6th was a legitimate protest today than they were previously.
And that said, and it's a combination of, you've got Fox News pumping propaganda out, downplaying the reality of that day. And then you also have elected representatives in Congress and other political positions going back to their constituents and telling them things like Andrew Clyde saying it was a tourist day. I forget his name, from Wisconsin, the senator there, Ron Johnson, saying that, he keeps engaging in this debate about what an armed insurrection is. Well, I mean, I hate to tell you this, Ron Johnson, but there were firearms there. There were guns there. It's a fact. You're going to have to get over it and accept the fact that this was an armed insurrection in whatever sense that you describe it as, but there were guns, period.
Says someone on the front lines. We know that there are, and certainly, in your broader mission to raise awareness about what happened, to hold people accountable, you've been remarkably successful, and this book is testament to that. There is a January 6th committee hearing on Thursday, and I wonder, when you think about that day, Are there any unanswered questions for you? What do you still wonder? Do you have questions?
I think at this point, the select committee has done an outstanding job of investigating, what I described early on in my congressional testimony. It's the root causes for January 6th. That was the question that I had for Liz Cheney that she asked me at the conclusion of my testimony. I want to know what the root causes were. And I think that we've seen that. We had a sitting president who looked to defraud the American people by saying that the 2020 election was stolen, that it was not, in fact, a free and fair election, which it was. The unanswered question I have is, why is it that almost 2 years out from January 6th, we've been incapable of acknowledging the police officers on an individual level who responded to the Capitol and fought not only to save the lives of the individuals in the building, to preserve democracy, and for one another. We awarded a Congressional Gold Medal to the Metropolitan Police Department and to the U.S. Capitol Police. And I think that's disingenuous, like many officers feel. It wasn't institutions like the Metropolitan Police Department that fought to save democracy. It was individual officers acting in their own volition in many situations, who, like myself, self-dispatched and went there and fought for hours.
Yeah. I mean, that's what you have done. What you did was extraordinary. And we know there are others like you, and our hope is that they feel empowered to come out and speak about their experiences. But until and unless that happens, we are left with these riveting and terrifying accounts like the one chronicled in your book. Officer Michael Fanone, formerly of the DC Metropolitan Police, thank you for sharing this. Thank you for your sacrifices so far on behalf of preserving our democratic institutions. The book is out today. It's called Hold the Line, The Insurrection and One Cop's Battle for America's Soul. Thanks for coming on.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you for having me.
We have much more ahead this hour. I will talk to one of the very few reporters to speak with Attorney General Merrick Garland, and someone who now believes the DOJ will actually indict Donald Trump. But next, Rachel Maddow will join me here in studio. There she is to talk about her new incredibly riveting podcast, Ultra, the radicalization of the GOP, and so much more. Stay with us.
Tiffany Smiley is so courageous. She's so clear. Her effect with her husband, who lost sight in both eyes in the war and came back to be the only sightless officer in the U.S. military, and the job she's done representing veterans. People just say to me, Patty Murray is tired, she's exhausted, and I think that's going to be one of the really great pickups come election night. And of course, Blake Masters just annihilated Mark Kelly in the debate because, Kelly couldn't explain why he voted for 87,000 IRS agents while voting against any additional agents for the border.
All right, Mr. Speaker, I'm hanging on to your predictions tight, and I hope you're right. You usually are. Anyway, appreciate you being with us. All right, coming up, the mob, the media, they are coming for a neat new GOP rising star. I'll go one-on-one with our old friend, Dr. Cornel West, about why Democrats are losing support in the African-American community and Hispanic community. Later tonight, our friend Dr. Phil, he will join us to talk about cancel culture and it being way out of control and a controversial show that he just aired. Straight ahead.
Is there any acceptable way that he can leave, in his mind, without seizing territory in a way that would not be acceptable to Ukraine?
I don't know what's in his mind. Clearly, he could leave. He could just flat leave and still probably hold his position together in Russia. The idea that he's been able to convince the significant Russian people that this is something that he thought made sense, but now he's accomplished what he wanted to do, and it's time to bring Russians home.
Would you be willing to meet with him at the G20?
Look, I have no intention of meeting with him, but for example, if he came to me at the G20 and said, I want to talk about the release of Griner, I'd meet with him. I mean, it would depend, but I can't imagine. Look, we've taken a position. I just did a G7 meeting this morning. the idea, nothing about Ukraine without Ukraine. So I'm not about to, nor is anyone else prepared to negotiate with Russia about them staying in Ukraine, keeping any part of Ukraine, etc. So it would depend on specifically what he wanted to talk about. But look, he's acted brutally. He's acted brutally. I think he's committed war crimes, so I don't see any rationality in that.
When people hear the word Armageddon, they get scared. From used by a U.S. president, they get scared. Do you think in any way discussing this type of thing publicly, openly, Putin's possible use of nuclear weapons, might have the opposite effect of what you want? It might make some of our wobblier European allies be even more scared of confronting Putin.
Well, no, I don't think so at all. I think, look, there was a directed, when I'm talking to Putin. He, in fact, cannot continue with impunity to talk about the use of a tactical nuclear weapon as if that's a rational thing to do. The mistakes get made, and the miscalculation could occur. No one can be sure what would happen, and it could end in Armageddon.
And you still are afraid of that, though, that it could?
Well, no, I don't think any rational person saying the initial use of of a nuclear weapon, killing thousands of people, does not have the prospect of leading to something that can be way out of control.
Let's turn to Saudi Arabia. Some of your Democratic allies on Capitol Hill are afraid that the U.S. got played when we went to Saudi Arabia and fist bumped with the Crown Prince, because now, obviously, a few months later, Saudi-backed OPEC is slashing oil production in partnership with Russia. The chairman of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee, Menendez, just called for a freeze on cooperation with Saudi Arabia, including most arms sales. Senator Durbin, the number 2 Democrat in the Senate, says the Saudis sided with Russia against the United States. Do you think it's time for the U.S. to rethink its relationship with Saudi Arabia?
Yes, and by the way, let's get straight why I went. I didn't go to oil. I went about making sure that we weren't going to walk away from the Middle East and what was going on. And by the way, today I just got off the telephone with the president I got off the phone with the Prime Minister of Israel and the President of Lebanon. They've worked out a deal. They've been at war, declared war with one another for a long time. They've worked out a bonding relationship along in the Eastern Mediterranean for oil, and they're going to make an agreement that is historic. We also got overflights for Israeli planes over Saudi Arabia. We got movement in terms of how we would deal in the Middle East with aggression from Iran. But it wasn't, there were eight other parties there. It wasn't about oil.
Okay, but
but we should, and I am in the process when the House and Senate gets back. They're going to have to. There's going to be some consequences for what they've done with Russia.
What kind of consequences? Menendez says suspend all arms sales. Is that something you'd consider?
I'm not going to get into what I consider and what I have in mind, but there will be consequences.
The midterm elections are 4 weeks from today. The economy remains top of mind for voters. J.P. Morgan Chase CEO said the U.S. is likely to enter a recession in the next 9 months. Bank of America says the U.S. could start losing 175,000 jobs a month. Gas prices are on the rise again. Should the American people prepare for a recession?
No. Look, they've been saying this now. How every 6 months they say this. Every 6 months they look down the next 6 months and see what's going to happen. It hadn't happened yet. It hadn't. There's no guarantee that they're going to be. I don't think there will be a recession. If it is, it'll be a very slight recession. That is, we'll move down slightly. Look, think about what's happened. We have done more. We're in a better position than any other major country in the world, economically and politically. We still have real problems, but look what we got done. We passed so much legislation that significantly makes a point about, for example, the American Rescue Plan, the legislation to deal with inflation, the Inflation Act. We moved along. I mean, there's so much that's been accomplished that the idea that there's an automaticity to a recession is just not there. They've been predicting this off and on for the last.
But you just said that a slight recession is possible.
It is possible. Look, it's possible. I don't anticipate it. But I do think, look, we talk about the impact on families. The families are, where they have reason to be concerned about energy prices. They have reason to be concerned about a whole range of issues. But look what we've done. We've been able to, with the Inflation Reduction Act, there's look, I know I always quoted my dad, but my dad used to say, what is there any breathing room for a middle class family? And the breathing room is after all the bills are paid at the end of the month, they have anything left. There's more than one way to bring down the cost, the monthly cost for people who in fact are struggling, to make sure they have the end meet and they have enough money. And that's what we've done with the Inflation Reduction Act. Look, we've reduced drug prices. We've allowed, for the first time, we've been trying for years to get Medicare to be able to negotiate drug prices. We pay the highest drug price of any nation in the world, any major nation. We are going to be in a situation where no senior is going to have to pay more than $2,000 a year for the drugs, no matter how much they cost. We've reduced the price. We're going to make sure that nobody has to pay more than $35 a month for insulin, et cetera. So there's so much that we've done, and the same with on energy. We passed look, what I ran on, I said we're going to deal with energy.
Right.
And the energy problem, we're going to deal with the whole notion of global warming. We passed $368 billion worth of help, which, as the same bankers talk about, is going to bring $1.7 billion off the sidelines investment. Look what's happened. Look at the investment that's going on in America.
Yeah. So you think Democrats have something to run on?
Oh, I think we do. I know we do. And here's the contrast. We know it. What's the Republican platform? What are they running on? What are they for? They want to put Social Security on the chopping block every 5 years, and the other leader comes along and says, no, every year it should be up for grabs. Medicare, Medicaid. Now, I mean, these aren't negotiable items in terms of whether they're going to continue them or not. The first thing they said they're going to do is get rid of the Inflation Reduction Act. And so what's that do? They're going to raise drug prices, raise medical costs again, be sure that we're going to no longer be able to have the ability to have tax credits for weatherizing your home, saving money. I mean, I don't know what they're for.
Our reporting, CNN's reporting, and the Washington Post reporting suggests that prosecutors think they have enough to charge your son Hunter for tax crimes and a false statement about a gun purchase. Personally and politically, how do you react to that?
Well, first of all, I'm proud of my son. This is a kid who got, not a kid, he's a grown man. He got hooked on, like many families have had happen, hooked on drugs. He's overcome that. He's established a new life. He is, I'm confident that what he says and does are consistent with what happens. For example, he wrote a book about his problems and was straightforward about it. I'm proud of him. He came along and said, by the way, this thing about a gun, I didn't know anything about it, but it turns out that when he made an application to purchase a gun, what happened was I guess you get asked the question, are you on drugs, you use drugs? He said no. And he wrote about saying no in his book. So I have great confidence in my son. I love him. And he's on the straight and narrow, and he has been for a couple of years now. And I'm just so proud of him.
You're about to turn 80 next month. Happy birthday ahead of time. Whenever anyone raises concerns about your age, you're the oldest president in the history of the United States, you always say, watch me. Voters have been watching you. Democratic voters approve of the job you're doing. Democratic voters overwhelmingly like you. But one poll shows that almost 2/3 of Democratic voters want a new nominee in 2024. And the top reason they gave was your age. So what's your message to Democrats who like you, who like what you've done, but are concerned about your age and the demands of the job?
Well, they're concerned about whether or not I get anything done. Look what I've gotten done. Name me a president in recent history that's gotten as much done as I have in the first 2 years. Not a joke. You may not like what I got done, but the vast majority of American people do like what I got done. And so it's a matter of, can you do the job? And I believe I can do the job. I've been able to do the job. I've got more done. I got the Inflation Reduction. I got all these pieces of legislation passed. And I ran on that. I said this is what I was going to do. And I'm still getting it done. You got, dealing with, making sure that veterans get compensated for for
burn pits.
The burn pits, making sure that we're in a situation where we finally have action on guns. And by the way, I'm going to get this assault weapons ban. Before this is over, I'm going to get that again. Not a joke. And watch. And so I just think there's it's a matter of, has anybody done more in the first 2 years of the administration for a guy who they've been saying this about my age since I began to run.
Mm-hmm.
And so, will you come work out with me in the morning?
Anytime. The big question, of course, is when you're going to make an official announcement about whether or not you're going to run for 2024 for re-election. Do you think you'll make a decision before the end of the year?
Well, look, I'm not going to make this about my decision. I'm going to make this about this off-year election. After that's done in November, then I'm going to be in the process.
Is one of the calculations that you think you're the only one who can beat Donald Trump?
I believe I can beat Donald Trump again.
All right, Mr. President, thank you so much for your time today. We really appreciate it.
Thank you.
And I know you're rooting for the Phillies.
That's a fact. If I weren't, I'd be sleeping alone. I'm married a Philly girl.
Yeah. All right, thank you, sir.
Thank you.
We have another special one-on-one for you. My new interview with Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson ahead. Did the superstar enjoy playing a superhero in his big return to the big screen? What about his possible presidential ambitions? We sat down to chat. It's good to see you. Is it okay if I call you Dwayne? I'm told that you prefer Dwayne or DJ.
Whatever comes out. I told your producer Daddy works too.
That would be very, very weird. That would be very strange. We'll be right back.
Trump actually believed those who are greedy, brother. It's the Trump secure fascists who are greedy too.
Trump gave us energy independence. Trump gave us the lowest unemployment for every demographic. You didn't answer though. What grade would you give Joe Biden and the Democratic Party on crime and law and order? What grade?
Trump on law and order?
No, Biden. He's the president. You're president.
Okay. I would give him a C minus.
C minus. All right, last question of the night, and I'm going to let you go. This is, and you got to give me a fair grade here. What grade do I get as a host?
What grade do you get as a host?
Yeah, as a host.
Brother Sean, my question is, what is the Christian dimension of your practice in terms of greed, hatred, corruption talked about on your show, and have you contributed to the shattering of the glue that hold us together?
What is my grade?
I would give you a D. I give you a D, brother.
The lowest grade of the night.
I'm giving you a D.
I'm going to shock you because I'm going to grade you. I'm going to give you your grade.
Me.
I am giving you an A because I like you so much, and if I like you that much, I have to give you an A. You're wrong on everything, but I give you an A.
You know. But of course, as a Christian, you know I'm going to be loving you and your family. But the question is, we got to make sure we got a democracy and a republic by 2024.
And you know what? We have an election in 28 days, and our border's not secure. We're paying the highest gas prices we've ever paid. 41-year high inflation, and our towns and cities are not safe.
Gangsterized, my brother. Too much hatred, too much greed, too much hypocrisy on both sides.
This is 49
BC, Roman Empire, crossing of the Rubicon, Caesar.
To be a C.
But I appreciate the A, even though that's just our brotherhood and friendship.
That's right.
I know that. All right. No, but that's same here. God bless you. Stay strong.
God bless you. When we come back, Dr. Phil joins us live to discuss how out of control cancel culture it is hurting society. He had a big show on it. He'll tell us all about it next.
Shipments. They're promises. Promises of all shapes and sizes. Each with a time and a place they've been promised to be. A promise is everything to Old Dominion because it means everything to you.
Hi, my name is Reggie, and I lost 30 pounds with Golo. Before Golo, my blood pressure was really high.
LA walked out of class to protest discrimination against Mexican-American students. The East LA blowouts were one of the largest student protests in U.S. history. For more stories celebrating Hispanic Heritage Month, go to history.com.
It's what sanctuary could look like, feel like, sound like, even smell like. More on that soon. the best part, the prequel is pretty sweet too. The BMW is almost out of Officer Bandy's sight.
I had a lot of dust in my face because he was going down the middle lane between the 4-lane road, and that helped me keep track of where he was going.
We're going to be going on Shelby northbound from County Line. Northbound Shelby, County Line. They're getting ready to approach the south left at this time. I'm still northbound on Shelby.
I was taking deep breaths to keep calm because if you let your adrenaline take control of you, you're going to make bad decisions.
Officer Bandy tracks the car as it approaches the intersection with East Stop 11 Road.
Oh, went through Stop 11. Oh, they just start, everybody, we just got a bad accident here. Bad accident. Start everybody.
They're back in stock. And now they come in even more colors and wide sizes. They're made with the same great patented technology. And yes, you'll still save $90 a pair. So get the biggest savings ever on bath sheets, bath mats, washcloths, hand towels, bathrobes, slippers, and so much more. So go to mypillow.com or call the number on your screen. Use your promo code and get deep discounts on all MyPillow bath products, including our 6-piece towel sets. Regular $89.98, now only 30 quantities last, so please order now. Hello, I'm Franklin Graham. It's hurricane season. We've already seen some incredible devastation. Many people find themselves in different kinds of storms in life, and we need an anchor to hang on to in these storms. The anchor that we need is Jesus Christ. He said, I'll never leave you or forsake you. And if we put our faith and trust in him, we know that he will take us through the storms of this life all the way to heaven one day, where we'll spend eternity with him. God sent Jesus Christ to this earth to save us from our sins. He took our sins to a cross where he shed his blood and died and was buried. And on the third day, God raised him to life. Would you like to invite him to come into your life and be the anchor of your soul? You can do that by praying this prayer with me right now. Just say, God, I'm a sinner. I'm sorry, forgive me. I want to turn from my sins. I believe that Jesus Christ is your son. I want to trust him as my Savior and follow him as my Lord. If you prayed that prayer, call that number right now that's on the screen. God bless you.
When you can't watch, listen. Get the latest news, business, and news headlines on SiriusXM. Anytime, anywhere. Fox News Audio on SiriusXM. America is listening.
Right now, as we have documented on the show night after night, censorship, silencing, boycotting, cancel culture, it is all becoming all too common within our political discourse, social media, college campuses, even in day-to-day life, even in the workplace. Many Americans feel forced to stay silent for fear of upsetting the cancel culture mob. And now all of this was the subject of a recent episode of the hit show Dr. Phil. Take a look.
Nowadays, you better watch what you say because there is always someone in person or online who will tell you, you can't say that, it's problematic. I mean, there are so many words and phrases that are off limits, it's hard to keep track of. They change all the time. For example, some say peanut gallery is now classist and racist. First world problem is also classist. Tone deaf is ableist. Mom and dad assumes traditional gender roles. I'm telling you, there's always something that seems to be a new word on the do not say list.
All right, Top Daytime syndicated talk show host Dr. Phil McGraw is with us now to explain. Dr. Phil, good to have you back on, my friend. Good to see you. How you been?
Well, good to talk to you, Sean. How you doing?
I'm good. You know, all my career, I've never called for a boycott, never called for a show to be canceled, never called for a host to be fired. I believe in something called freedom, we can't make people watch our shows or listen to my radio show. People have choices, and I believe in freedom. But that is not the prevailing view anymore, is it?
Well, sadly, it's not. I always thought that we went to the universities to hear other people's ideas and to, not necessarily agree with them, but at least learn something about what they had to say. Now we see surveys that tell us anywhere from 15 to 30% of students think it's okay to yell down a speaker that you don't that you don't agree with. I think that we're just getting to the point that we're in a bubble. We don't want to talk to anyone that doesn't agree with our thinking. And if someone says something that is offensive to our sensibilities, then people go on the attack. And they may choose a wrong word. And instead of saying, maybe message him in some way, saying, hey, listen, you may not know it, but that could be offensive to someone. Instead, they start bombarding them with boycott messages, so they hope they die. I'm going to slit your throat in the night. I hate that.
You've been reading my Twitter
things.
You've been reading my Twitter account, I can tell.
You know exactly what I'm talking about.
I do. You said something in the open of your show that caught my attention. I can't keep up. I don't, one day it's okay to say one thing, the next day, apparently it's outlawed. And if you say it, you're immediately labeled this or that. And, it's said innocently, not designing it to hurt somebody.
Well, really the mentality has gotten to a point of being a gotcha sort of culture. And it doesn't really matter to a lot of people if that really reflects that person's values and beliefs. And I think as a result, a lot of groups alienate people that in fact are allies, people that in fact would support their position or their cause. And I think that's just that's not smart. It's not good thinking. Somebody makes a slip of the tongue, chooses a word that maybe is not in vogue at the moment, it's not on the glossary, and they get attacked instead of saying, hey, listen, let's build a bridge here. You may be alienating some real allies. And I had a complete list up there, and a lot of the audience couldn't even guess why the words were up there.
I couldn't guess them either. Let me ask you what the result was, because this was a pretty controversial show that you did. And what was the end result? What was the audience reaction by the time you got to the end of the hour?
Well, Sean, I'm glad you asked that. I've moved my entire audience up onto the stage as a focus group at this point, everybody, and I encourage them to speak. And I've seen the results of surveys, like the Cato Institute says that 62% of Americans, that's almost 2/3 of Americans, are afraid to speak out for fear that they will say something they shouldn't say. And I ask my audience, how many of you are afraid to speak up or say something right now in this show? You can't say that. How many of you are afraid to speak up right now? And it looked like the wave at Texas Stadium. I mean, people just say, no, I'm scared to death, Doc. Don't call on me. I don't want to say the wrong thing. It's not that I think, feel, or behave in the wrong way. I'm just afraid I'll run a red light and the word police will get all over me.
And by the way, can we be honest about this? I think a lot of people feign that they're outraged. They're not outraged. If you're outraged by a couple of words, you need to grow up. And you know what? If you feel bad about yourself, go read my Twitter feed and what the comments that people make about me. You'll feel a lot better about yourself. There's my advice. Stop being a snowflake.
I asked a lot of people, like Blindsided was up there, and people were saying, well, that offends people that are unsighted. Well, I've talked to a lot of those people. None of them seem to be offended. Maybe it's just because I haven't talked to enough, but it's other people that seem to be offended on their behalf. Now, I'm not saying there aren't people that aren't, but I haven't talked to them yet. I certainly think we don't have to get offended every time we have the chance to be offended. And I think that's where we've missed the boat.
All right, Dr. Phil, congratulations on another great successful year and launch for your show. We appreciate you being with us as always. Thank you, sir. All right, when we come back, we now found out that the FBI, get this, Your FBI offered the source of Hillary Clinton's dirty Russian disinformation dossier. They offered the source, the guy that said it was not true, $1 million. Details straight ahead.
Sometimes you're so busy taking care of everyone else, you don't do enough for yourself or your mouth. But eventually,